America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government, protecting our liberty.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Your Right to Know, presented by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Tonight we're going to be interviewing a candidate for State Senate. Before I go further, though, I'd like to thank the Workers Credit Union Studio for making this space available to us. Our guest tonight is Mr. Ken Hoyt, who's a Republican candidate for the State Senate here in Massachusetts. And I think I'll begin simply by asking Ken to tell us a little bit about himself. We know that you're an independent business owner, and you have a company, I think it's called Hoyt Wealth Management.
Correct.
And how would you say that you see your business experience translating into relevance to the issues that we face today, since you're a newcomer to politics, I believe?
Yes.
So why don't you take it away, Ken, and tell us about your business experience and that relationship.
Will do.
Good.
Thank you. So I'll start off by telling you about myself a little bit first.
Good.
So first and foremost, I'm a husband and father of 3 kids, aged 21, 18, and 14. 2 of them still live with us. We live in Westford. Didn't always live in Westford. I grew up in Natick, Massachusetts. Graduated from Syracuse University with a degree in finance, and then some years later I got a master's degree in finance as well. So not surprisingly, by trade, in the financial industry, I'm a certified financial planner, and as you mentioned, I have my own solo practice called Hoyt Wealth Management. So
how would you say that you see your role as a legislator in terms of impacting legislation, given your background? Would you primarily be focused on financial matters, things like that?
I'll answer that question by telling you what got me into this race and what motivated me, and maybe dovetail into that. So what really, like a lot of people, I'm really kind of amazed at what's going on with the Democratic Party running things. We have runaway inflation, we have open borders, we have mandates, and generally just assaults on our freedom in general. So the story is about late in March, I was always been interested in running, and I thought, you know, the new districts are coming out, and I saw the new district come out, and I thought, boy, this district looks like a cross-section of Americana, working people, and basically all types of people. And so I sent a note to the state committee woman in Westford. Her name is Kathy Lynch, and I said, is anyone running for the seat? And this is late March, and she sent an email back in all caps saying no, and we need somebody to step up. So I said, I was off and running at that point. I asked her why she wasn't running, and the state committeeman why he wasn't running. They had both run before, and they just thought it was time for someone new. So I took out papers and collected signatures, and I got over 400 signatures, and I did turn them in last week to the Secretary of State's office, so I will be on the ballot. Did I leave something out there?
No, actually you've anticipated another question I was going to ask about the district, and I think what you've said is really an answer to that you look upon the district as sort of a reflection of the state, maybe the country as a whole.
Yes.
And I can see that because here in Fitchburg, for example, we certainly are representative of certain areas, both in the state and the nation at large, and that makes sense. I mean, in terms of like the depression of the economy here and so on.
Absolutely. Like in presidential elections, they say that Ohio is a bellwether state.
Right.
I would think that this district would be like a bellwether district. It seems like it's a cross section and has everything, and it's not completely blue, meaning Democratic.
Right.
So there's probably no areas that are deep red, but this comes
Right,
close.
right. Mary, would you like to carry on?
Well, you know, you had sort of hinted upon it because of your being a financial manager. And certainly this, you came through numerous times to help us collect signatures for you. So you've gotten to see Fitchburg and Leominster and your new district, the new district. So you got to see this part of the state a little bit up close and personal. And you must see Main Street. We're derelict. I
Yeah.
mean, I drive down it and I could cry because of the shuttered, the buildings with paper up on windows, and
Yeah.
anything that was a storefront is now closing. So in your business and in your sort of global experience and education profession on finances and fiscal issues, what can be done, and what can be done as a state senator to help us? Because this is a problem.
Yeah, I think it stems from, that problem stems from one party rule, first of all. As you pointed out earlier, it's, you know, I look at roll call votes and I see that it was 37 for and 3 against, and whenever there's amendments, they lose 3 for and 37 against, and I thought, well, who are these 3 rascals? And
Yeah.
it turns out they're Republicans.
There's the 3 Republicans.
So, I mean,
The outliers, every case.
yes. So I think I have a lot to learn about the budget, but I sense that the money is there. It's just that areas like Fitchburg are getting the short end of the stick in terms of the funding calculations, in terms of local aid, the transportation budget. So I've been told that there's a lot more money coming out of this district than is coming back into the district. So obviously that's something I want to work on, and that's also something that should be bipartisan as well. I don't know why Democratic legislators aren't pushing for this as well, and the only thing I can think of is maybe they just follow the leadership's wishes. You know, they say jump and they say how high,
Right.
as opposed to fighting for the district.
Right, right. We had Senator Dean Strang, who previously held this position. And one of the things Senator Strang did was fight for the district and was able to secure not just money, but good, solid money that made a difference. I've oftentimes remarked on the show even, and sometimes I'm on a different show, and I've remarked that we oftentimes see the photo ops with the office holders, and they'll have a big byline that I just brought home $50,000 to redo this, and this whatever has never changed.
Right.
It's still in the same deplorable state it has been.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. One of the interesting things that I found you, and really, I will say it to our viewers, Republicans who are candidates for public office did, is actually went out and got signatures yourself. You were in town dumps.
Yeah.
You went to outside the grocery stores with us. You went around to get signatures. What did you find when you talked to the people? They must have given you an earful.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm surprised that I figured all candidates do that. Do some candidates not do that? That's anyway.
Isn't it shocking?
Right.
Yeah. This
So-
is a true opportunity to meet and greet.
Absolutely. So as you pointed out, most of the signature gathering happened outside Market Basket. So not surprisingly, the thing that was on most people's mind, it seems to me, is inflation. Not necessarily a state issue, but more emblematic of the Democratic Party in general, just with massive spending increases and cutting off the production of oil and all kinds of things like that. So that seems to be the thing on most people's mind nationally. More locally, I think people are fed up with just general overreach of government. The most recent example being, of course, the lockdowns from COVID, using that pandemic, if you will, as an excuse to grab power. Never let a crisis go to waste, as they say.
And keep the power.
Yes. So those are the two biggest ones. The other one that came up was parents feeling like they don't have a say in how their kids, and how their kids are being taught in school. So issues like inappropriate sexual content to elementary school kids and critical race theory and things like that. And when they go to the school board meetings to say something, they're either ignored or worse, just silenced completely, not allowed to speak. So I heard a lot of that as well. But it seems to be inflation and mandates is the big one, are the big two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, this issue of inflation, my background is in philosophy and not in economics, but even in my background and history, I'm aware, for example, of the threat of inflation that really did end the Weimar Republic and heralded Hitler. I think people, probably our viewers, may have heard the term fiat money, which is essentially money issued simply by fiat by a government. When ordinary people, ordinary cities run into economic problems, they don't have the power to issue money, but government does. And we've certainly all experienced this. We've witnessed, and we are the victims of this, this urge on the part of the Democrat Party under Biden to issue money at incredible rates, which is leading, of course, to this incredible inflation and gas prices. But I don't want to trumpet in your stead there. I think you agree with essentially with that characterization I gave. How would you characterize the effectiveness of our current elected officials in Boston? You've touched on this a little bit, and I think you alluded to the fact that the Senate, the state Senate, has a total of 40 members, 37 of whom are indeed Democrats, only 3 Republicans.
Yes.
Do you think that one-party rule in Massachusetts is going to continue, and do you think it will continue to negatively impact our state?
So first I'm going to go back to the inflation thing for a
Yes,
minute.
yes.
And what some people realize and some people don't is that inflation is really just a tax.
Yes.
It has the effect of a tax. If the government wants to raise money, they either raise taxes or they go further into debt, which I think was not an option for them this time, so they simply printed the money. And if there's more money sloshing around the system, it's worth less. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out, and so things cost more. So it's it's a direct result of democratic overspending and trying to grab more power and influence from COVID. So I don't want it to people to discount, but the last number I saw was 8.3% inflation rate.
Yeah.
And for some reason, and I can only speculate why, they don't include food and fuel in that number.
Yeah.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right. Yeah.
by some estimates, it's actually 15 or
I've even seen
16%.
close to 20%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing, and it's something that Americans have not experienced until now. You know.
Not in my lifetime.
No.
Well, in the 70s, but I was just a kid.
Well,
But
even
yeah.
then, it wasn't that bad. I mean, comparatively.
I wish I could claim I was a kid. John and I are of the age that we definitely remember the
I
gas
do remember the
lines
gas
and the
lines.
gas shortages.
Well, I remember my parents complaining about the gas lines, and I've seen the pictures. But yeah, so I just to kind of close the loop on that. I mean, that inflation is not just something that happens. It's caused by government. In this case, it's caused by Democrats. So I think your question was about one-party rule and how that might.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a little hard to draw a connection between inflation and state government, but certainly one-party rule is never a good thing. And I could give numerous examples, I suppose, but I feel like in Massachusetts, not only is it ruled by one party, but the individual legislators within the Democratic Party don't seek to fight for their district on their own. They just go
They don't
along with the
exhibit
party.
independence, in other words.
There's
on
no
their own, right?
mavericks there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's
Yes.
the leadership says this is what we want, and if you want the next committee post to open up, if you want to chair that committee, you need to be on board. So just be on board. So I feel like that's what the current occupant of this office does as well, because I haven't seen, in his limited time there, I haven't seen him depart from what the leadership wants at all. So.
Now, you mentioned you're the father of children. You still have 2 at home. And oftentimes I think this makes a difference in how you perceive the world.
Yeah.
How you, because you're responsible for a budget in your home.
Yeah.
How do you look at how the state is spending money? You couldn't do it, John couldn't do it, I couldn't do it, our viewers can't do it. We are all responsible. And yet, when it comes to the government spending our money, they just have an open and free checkbook. How do you change that mentality?
Well, luckily, if the answer would be different whether you're talking about the federal government and the state government. Of course, the state government luckily does have some guardrails in place. Because
we'd have to balance our budget.
They have to balance the budget. So they do balance the checkbook in a sense, but there's always, of course, a never-ending thirst for more money, and the way they seem to get around it lately is by having these crises happen on the federal level, and then the federal government, sends bailout money to the states. So they're not really, the amount of money they have available is increasing despite the balanced budget. So so how do you spend it? That's the primary job of the state legislature, is to work these things out collaboratively, hopefully on a bipartisan basis, and with each legislator fighting not only for their core beliefs but also for their district. So I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how that sausage comes out.
Massachusetts right now has a surplus.
Yes.
The taxation coming in was way beyond what was predicted and expected. How do you feel about putting some of that money back into the pockets of the taxpayers?
Good question. And well, one thing that came to mind as you were asking the question is that we have I think it's a 24-cent gas tax, and both New Hampshire and Connecticut and many other states have temporarily suspended that gas tax. And Massachusetts refuses to do it.
And our legislatures supported that.
Right.
Not to do it.
And including the current senator voted not to suspend the gas tax. I mean, that would be just a really simple way, given the surplus and given inflation, to just give some of it back. That would be the first obvious thing, is to do that. There are many other ways. I'm actually not too upset with the flat 5% gas tax. There has been a movement to have a graduated income tax, where I think the state is looking at other progressive states like New York and California and saying, geez, they have a 4%, a 5%, a 7%, an 8%, and a 9%. Why can't we do that? In Massachusetts, you have to amend the Constitution, the state Constitution, in order to do that. So that was attempted. Again, the current senator did vote to change the Constitution to allow for graduated income tax, and I certainly would not do that.
Would not do it, is
I would not want. I would want to keep it at 5%.
Yeah.
But in terms of giving money back, other than the gas tax, I think it's probably time to cut back on the sales tax. It's still 6 1/4, and you'll notice that especially if you buy an automobile. 6 1/4 goes to the state. I think the state makes more money on a car purchase than the dealership. So.
Well, also, I think you'll find, I don't know about Westford, but in this area of Massachusetts, many go across the border, go over the border to New Hampshire to buy items because you're not dealing with the tax.
Exactly.
So that's revenue lost and businesses that are not allowed to thrive because people just leave the state. Let me ask you this, because I just came back this past weekend from the Republican convention, the state convention, and one of the outcomes of the state convention was to see the overwhelming support by Republicans for candidate Jeff Deal over Republican candidate Dowdy. Now, the kind of upshot is that Jeff Deal is a more solid Republican versus Dowdy, which is a centrist. who is a centrist. How do you define yourself?
Okay.
Which line of the spectrum would you say you're on?
Yes. So I would, first of all, I would describe myself as a constitutional conservative, or maybe even a libertarian leading conservative. And by that, I mean there are certain things that I am not going to budge on. And I can get into those later, but it's basically anything that restricts our freedoms in any way. And that includes tax increases, restrictions on how we protect ourselves and what we put in what we inject into our bodies and things like that. Those things are non-negotiable. So yes, looking at their platforms, I identify more with Jeff Deal. I feel like he's a constitutional conservative as well.
Yes.
So was that your question?
Yes.
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 Yeah, that's how I would, a constitutional conservative, and some people use the word patriot. That works too, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that clearly defines, I think, the difference.
Yes.
John, did
Actually, that description, that self-description, meshes with that of Aaron,
yes.
our
And-
previous guest in the previous
Yes,
month's
and
show.
you've met Aaron.
Yes.
You were collecting
Oh, yeah.
signatures
Right.
with Aaron. Do you think it's important for state senator and state representative, because you would have, as a state senator, you would have several state representatives in your
Yes.
area. Do you
Overlapping,
think it's
yeah.
important to collaborate as well,
As a
some were
team.
going to be out of the party, but nevertheless collaborate as a
Right,
team?
as a team, yeah.
Ideally, we would have. Well, first of all, I thought you were going to ask if we should have the same views. I mean, ideally, we would be aligned politically like that. There's not going to be an exact match
Yeah.
there, but regardless of someone's political party or views, we need collaboration. And there's issues facing the state that require bipartisanship, whether we like it or not. To cite a few examples, I might have mentioned them before, but local aid funding, the formula, I should say, that goes into local aid, the transportation budget, and even locally here, things like the right to choose a municipal utility. And I should have mentioned that when you asked what people are upset about, and a lot of people in this area are up in arms about their utility bills,
Yes.
over and above inflation. And I looked at a chart recently, and there was, you guys probably know this, but it was new to me, so I'll say it. Apparently, there's 3 for-profit utility companies, NSTAR, Eversource, and Unitil, and then there's municipal. Some towns have their own municipal utility, and of those 4 categories, Unitil was by far the highest rates. And so they are, there was a bill passed, there was a bill filed that's just died in committee to allow the towns in Unitil to create a municipal utility, and it just hasn't gone anywhere. So I bring this up because that would be an example of, it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how conservative, liberal you are. That's something that the voters of this district care about, and so you have to work together and
Yes.
things like that.
One of the things that, having lived here for a number of years, that as I stand out, roads.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody is apoplectic about the condition of our roads. And yet this stems from Boston. This stems from our
Yeah.
capital. How do you fight for money for roads?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it earlier. I think it's I don't know the
And
exact.
that should be a bipartisan.
That would be another bipartisan thing, absolutely. Fighting for your district instead of going along with leadership. I don't know the exact formula that takes place, but what I have been told is that the formula for dishing out those funds is heavily weighted towards Boston and the Boston area. So money comes out of Fitchburg and surrounding areas, and we don't get it all back. So anybody who's elected needs to be fighting to get that money back to the district. Yeah.
Good. Good. What would you say as a newcomer to politics to your audience out here, what you want to do for them? There have been, actually, the Republican Party has hosted a number of significant newcomers to politics.
Yep.
Donald Trump, the most obvious name there, but Ronald Reagan too was an actor who went into politics because he saw certain significant problems in California. So how would you introduce yourself as a non-politician to your electorate?
So I view this election as an opportunity for not just Republicans, but independents and conservative-leaning Democrats to push back on all the lunacy that's going on today. So what do I'll tell you what I stand for, and that's, hopefully that aligns with the audience. So I am against any type of medical tyranny. This all falls under the umbrella of freedom, of course. I'm against any type of medical tyranny, including vaccine mandates and mask mandates. I think people should have a say, again, on what gets put into their bodies, what puts on their face, what they say, what they can write, how their kids are taught. So that is my primer. That's the core of my campaign. I want people to know also that I will be fighting for them on a district level as well, as we touched on, getting money back to the district for roads and local aid, and just overall being a fighter for smaller, leaner government that works for everyone, including this district.
And that's consistent with your position of being a constitutional politician.
Absolutely.
You believe in the Constitution. Believers in the Constitution are not believers in big government. That should be obvious, but I guess it requires saying in this day and age, because it's maybe not obvious to a lot of people.
Yes.
The solution is not government. The solution is ordinary people. And you're an example of an ordinary man who's standing up to try to do what has to be done.
It was always intended to be a citizen legislature.
That's right.
And people come in, they should serve a few terms and either move up or move out. And the argument for career politicians seems to be, well, they accumulate experience. Well, there are people on committee staffs and so forth that they're the professionals. The politicians themselves should be, go back to the farm afterwards, or go back to your profession after a few terms.
Like Cincinnatus in ancient Rome.
I didn't know that reference.
Yes, well, that is.
Ken, before we wrap up, because we only have a minute or so to go, just tell us how people can contact you or get in touch with you.
Yes, so the easiest way is to find my website. Just Google it, Hoyt for Senate.
Hoyt,
H-O-Y-T for Senate. Yep.
.org.
.org. Yep. And then also, I'm in the process. I haven't done it yet, but I've been hesitant to do it, but I'm going to set up a Facebook page as well with the same tagline, Hoyt for Senate.
And I think you'll be joining us for our Civic Days activities here in Fitchburg, which we haven't had for 2 years.
Yay.
And so we're going to get back to the block party and the parade. So
excellent.
Thank you very much for joining John and me tonight. We really appreciated you coming in and talking to our viewers and letting our viewers and our voters out this way get to know you. You'll be touring and being in this area often, and so we welcome you anytime you'll be with us next month, June 9th at the British American Club at 7 o'clock. You'll be with us.
Yes.
So anybody who wants to come and meet Ken in person, please feel free. And we thank you for joining the Fitchburg Republican City Committee tonight. As we leave you, we want you to remember that your local city or town Republican Committee is your only organization that holds dear your liberty, your constitutional values, and your rights. And we encourage you to join us on June 9th and meet Ken. And also we'll have another couple of candidates with us. Why? Because for us, we feel the GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people. And we always stand for your freedom. And thank you again to Workers Credit Union for allowing us this opportunity to express our First Amendment rights. Thank you and good night.